Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, which is first in a series of webinars that are aimed towards promoting, discussing, creating, and showing case studies of architecture as a tool for achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. It aims to have a series, the work program aims to have a series of webinars that will aim to curate projects or exemplars of architectural interventions in the built heritage that we aim to exhibit at the UAA World Congress of Architects in Denmark. So this first webinar, Adaptive Reuse of Heritage Buildings, will focus on two of the themes that will be at the World Congress, namely design for rethinking resources and design for health through the heritage lens. So in this webinar, we'll have a series of presentations that cut across, and we'll look at issues to do with development-oriented conservation, issues of sustainability, reduction of this carbon footprint through use of existing building stock, and issues of sustainable consumption. However, before we go on, we'll have a short pre-recorded video of our Secretary General, who is not able to be with us today. And after that, we'll start off with our webinar for today. Thank you.
It is my great honor to be given this opportunity to address all of you. On behalf of the UIA, I would like to thank and congratulate UIA Heritage and Cultural Identity Work Program, Mohammad Habib Reza and Qasim Mumba Omar, the co-directors in organizing this special webinar on adaptive reuse of heritage building. I would also like to thank all the presenters and the moderator for your immense contributions towards this very important topic that is not only close to our hearts, but affects us globally. The UIA work programs are very important parts of the UIA. They are policy-driven and relevant to the critical aims of the UIA, with the representations from all the 5 regions. The Heritage and Cultural Identity Work Program aims to promote methods for the conservation of architectural heritage and works to protect existing and future heritage and cultural sites from natural disasters. The programs engages in questions of urban and sustainable development, rehabilitation, renovation, and conservation of existing sites, striving to establish high international standards for good practice. Today's webinar is part of a series of initiatives planned by the Heritage and Cultural Identity Work Program to stimulate discussions on the important roles played by our heritage and culture in contributing to the UN 17 SDGs, leading to the UIA next key milestone, that is the UIA Copenhagen World Congress, with the theme, Sustainable Futures, Leaving No One Behind. Today's presentations will be focusing on design for rethinking resources and design for health. This is also in line with one of the key focus of the UIA this year, as 2022 has been mandated as the UIA Year of Design for Health. Our cultural heritage has great impacts on the quality and overall well-being of the community at multiple levels, and they must be leveraged and preserved to fully achieve the SDGs for the benefit of all. They enhance environmental quality, holistically supports physical, mental, emotional, social, cultural, spiritual, and economic needs that enables the full realizations of the human potential, fundamental to community well-being and resilience. Cultural heritage also helps us to remember our cultural diversity, identities, and its understanding develops mutual respects and renewed dialogues amongst different cultures. We are heading towards a more globalized and urbanized environment. The rapid and ill-controlled globalizations and urbanization have caused a huge loss of our culture and heritage that have huge environmental and social impact. There's increasingly evidence that show that properly planned urban environment that is inclusive and with strong connections to our culture and heritage will deliver multiple benefits to the health and well-being of the people. As such, architect plays a critical role to work collectively to catalyze actions and influence urban transformation and protect our cultural heritage and Mother Earth for our future generations. This webinar, with the assembly of presenters who are experts in this topic, will serve as a great platform for us to share our common values, knowledge, experience, and aspirations. It will also stimulate fruitful discussions, which will result in positive outcomes that will be integrated into the UIA Copenhagen World Congress discussion. So let us all work together to make a meaningful difference. And thank you.
We thank our Secretary General for those welcoming remarks. And without further ado, I would wish to welcome our moderator, Marla Haber Goldstein. Marla is a holder of a postgraduate degree in urban historical preservation. She is a long practicing architect and is a representative of the Union of Israeli Architects and Urban Planners on the Jerusalem Preservation Committee. Marla, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Kassif. Today's presentation is our group's first webinar titled Adaptive Reuse of Heritage Buildings, and I'm adding urban landscapes as well, which aims to relate to the two themes of the Copenhagen Grand Forum in 2023, design for rethinking resources and design through health through the heritage lens. I'd like to also thank the other people who helped put this together, and Jamala Pradham, Professor Michael Turner, both Mohamed Habib Riza and Dr. Qasim Omar Mumba from our heritage team. Our first speaker today is Poonam Verma Mascarenhas from India. Poonam is an architect, building conservationist, researcher, and writer with domestic and international experience. She has degrees in architecture and the conservation of historic buildings, and is the founding director of the Goa-based award-winning studio Arcanova Environs. Her recent projects include the rehabilitation of the Shimla Town Hall and the conservation of historic urban precinct buildings in Mandi, Himachal Pradesh. She is the co-founder of Goa Heritage Action Group and serves on the first scientific council committee of ICOMOS India. She has lectured both nationally and international conferences and is the author and contributor of numerous articles and books relating to traditional buildings, conservation, and planning. Poonam will speak today about cultural dynamics for climate action. Poonam, please.
Thanks very much. Let me share my screen. That didn't work. I'm not being allowed to share the screen.
Juliet, could you please check? Can you play it from the
Something is wrong
background?
that it just keeps throwing me to launch music. Is my screen visible?
Yes. Yes, your screen is visible.
I think, Poonam, select the PowerPoint icon next to the Zoom at the bottom.
It's there? Yes.
Is it opening?
Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. It's always this. We just practiced. Okay. Thanks very much, UIA, for creating this platform to share our experiences and thoughts for the sustainable present and the future. I'd like to acknowledge in the beginning itself the teams at RUIDP, as well as HICAR and IDIPT and Archinova Environs, as all projects our team works.
Juliet,
While
is it possible to
perspectives-
share the presentation from the Secretariat side?
You're not able to see my screen, that means.
No, no, it's visible. It's visible. You can continue.
Right, thank you. So here we are, the two streams of conservation and sustainability have had same foothold in the present of us as custodians to ensure caretaking of resources and not robbing the next generation of its availability. However, in reality, conservation of both built and natural often plays out on a battleground, where the predominant economic model of infinite growth and one of its principal tools, development, is in direct conflict with our planet's infinite resources, which are not infinite, they are finite. Culture is considered as the fourth pillar of sustainable development. However, I believe it can be the integrator connecting other pillars of economic growth, social inclusion, environmental protection in distributing the weight of sustainability. Specifically, culture as a process, wherein the first step is a new pattern of behavior is invented or an existing one is modified. Humans on subcontinent of India with 6 climatic zones have undertaken this process for 3,000 years as per historical records. Medieval India saw subsequent centuries of demolition and material reuse for new construction. Additionally, patterns of innovation, assimilation, appropriation, adaptation, adoption, and fusion continue to shape the built environment through the subsequent Mughal and colonial periods. The 3 millennium of living culture is testimony of humans to be most adaptable and are the key to managing the finite resources of this planet. The capacity to overcome adversity needs both abilities and adaptability of humans. In context of built environment, world over, traditional materials were just 4. Stone, earth, lime for mortar and plaster decorations, and wood for floors, doors, windows, columns, and roofs. But traditional building culture was contextual and was guided by climate, terrain, and judicious management of resources. And that's what produced a very distinctive regional design. In Indian planning and development model, conservation is perceived as preservation, which is largely a colonial construct focused on monumental and is deemed as heritage product with various values that comprise its significance. But really, conservation is so much more. It is life cycle, science of materials, and it is about managing change and with varied degrees of interventions while retaining the identified values and continuity through appropriate use. Historically too, this has been the process. A building process was invented and then improved through time, and the most resolved solutions survived and were popularized, and these yield us the traditional building stocks. If we continue with the process mindfully, then we shall have cultural resources that can continue to be relevant and aid in containing the carbon footprint. Let us examine this process through examples. Heritage assets are owned differentially, and thus I have selected accordingly from my repertoire. Here is the structure. We shall be reviewing government-funded conservation projects at the level of nature and culture, urban conservation at Jaipur and Amer, and the building level from Shimla and Mandi. In terms of privately funded, I have shortlisted 4 from Jaipur, Coorg, and Goa. Also different climatic zones, each of them are. And then we shall briefly look at the development model experienced as a citizen at Goa, the smallest state of India, and my initiative in Panjim, where I'm joining you all from. To begin, let's look at nature culture. At Amber, the concept of planning and designing with nature became very tangible to me. Essentially, a dam walls spanning the 2 hills of Aravali in the northern outskirts of Amer village, designed to rooms have lower levels and services at the pavilion to serve as short stay lodge for the royals. This constituted Upper Sagar, and the Lower Sagar was another check dam with a walkway. The resultant reservoirs, along with Panamiyaka Kund, which is a stepped well in the valley at the village center, are design interventions from an era of deep understanding of topography and water connect. While restoring, we desilted the reservoirs, repaired the dam walls, and emptied the stepped well of all the solid waste that had collected over decades in time for the good monsoon rains. We were delighted to find that not only the restored 3 sites, but the entire 175 wells in the valley around Amber had water in them, against 26, as was the case before conservation. Thus, not only the built elements got restored, the surroundings developed, cater for cultural practices of the communities, but by serendipity, we had managed to recharge the water table that in turn revived the ancient water system for the entire village. And believe me, it is most rewarding and humbling to experience this ingenuity of the 12th century planners and builders such close. 2 decades on, many farms have been revived because of the recharge water table. Through many such revitalization works all around there, a revival of ponds, lakes, reservoirs in the whole region. Recharging the water table is the best form of banking for prosperity, is my takeaway from it. At Mathura Gate, another in Amer itself, we conserve the historic fabric. We have introduced an open-air theatre as a public asset for the community's cultural lives, and mindful of its design and to check encroachment. Its proximity to the new highway has made it really popular amongst the cultural festival organizers, and Rajasthan is dotted with festivals. Next example is from Jaipur. A walled city founded in 1727 is really the greenest city to me, but some other day about that. Today, we're looking at, along with the conservation of heritage fabric of the city, we did manage to incorporate and provide sympathetic activities that were being undertaken on the extents of the project sites. For example, the vegetable market at Chandpol Gate was reorganized and provision for short time parking for the shoppers too was incorporated. At Newgate, intervention was done in the wall to create pedestrian gates to ensure safety of citizens, and unorganized, all that pay parking was resolved and redesigned. At Galta Gate, which is the east gate of the city, our research informed of 2 months long yearly pilgrimage, an affair that impacted the site quite adversely. And so we designed the stormwater drain covers with stone slabs to also facilitate as platforms for the fair and for the pop-up shops that come up. And we added a public pay toilet for sympathetic design, placed it discreetly on the site. The series of stepped platforms and landscaping serves as campsite for the pilgrims, while the residents use it to socialize on other days. The rehabilitation Shimla Town Hall displayed capacity building within the government departments. However, the challenge came in execution, and that too in the form, from the craftsmen. The attitude of job for money was resulting in shoddy works. to bring a sense of respect for the old building that they were working on, I had to remind them that while the building may be from colonial era, the craftsmen that had built this building in 1908 were from the region and probably their own ancestors. This sentiment did shape some change of attitude of ownership of one's work. The conservation works were substantial, but the key issue of decay can be summed up from two pictures at the right corner of your screen and the slide. The original drain level and the road relationship was destroyed by subsequent years of retarring, resulting in water ingress into the foundation of the retaining walls. We re-established the relationship by pushing the road away and retaining it separately. Entrance stairway was recasted. The linchpin location and independent accessibility to each level allowed us to create three uses of the building. While we hope this time the users will be more mindful, it is rather a pity that when it comes to heritage buildings, dialogues between stakeholders ended with ownership claims, but not really sharing of responsibility, as we all can see from the pictures of the status before conservation. The double-story mud limestone Deodar wood colonial hill architectural marvel today sits in a sprawling 2-acre complex of Vijay Senior High School. Established in 1866, this whole block is a historic Vijay High School, the first school of Mandi. Who is said to have, it is named after the Raja of Mandi, Shri Vijay Sen, who donated land and funds. Many of people from Himachal administration services have walked through its portals and fondly recalled their time, and it helped us discern that the neglected, abandoned, vandalized state and the use as storage of a broken school furniture was only a recent occurrence. Nevertheless, one had to wonder why the building could not be repaired while the schools expanded. This is an example of a development that is not conservation oriented. Dialogues with stakeholders helped establish the preferred use to be library and vocation center on the ground floor, while art classes and exhibition spaces to be housed on the first floor. The experienced and dedicated teams of stonemasons, Mr. Nukharam, carpenters, Tularamji, and line works, Mr. and Mrs. Shamlal and team, ensured this resurrection. Rainwater harvesting, new design drainage from courtyard around the building, as well as grass pavers to ensure water table recharging are additional features. The practice of conservation principles, traditional works, processes, specification by all involved professionals sure have helped to bring back to life this 153-year-old socio-cultural and traditional architectural heritage, and hopefully will live for another 100 years, provided the collective ownership extends to the regular maintenance. For now, the ground floor is temporarily occupied by preschool kids as their new block is being under construction. The challenge that is inherent in our institutional framework for government project is in the continued regular and sensible maintenance and periodic repairs, employing traditional skills and materials. Amongst the private, this is palatial Golcha Garden project. It is a 17th century garden palatial property in which additions of several building layers for many users, such as factory, head office, took place in the last half of the 20th century. The Art Deco facade is the office block. The two residential wings on the north and the south end of the original palace with wide verandas and red sandstone colonnade. The north wing was given a makeover in the 90s, comprising formal living room, dining refurbished when the owner or the inheritor brought home a new bride. The addition of 2 children to the family initiated the process of rationalization of the built fabric, as while there were several rooms, as you can see on the left, but they were not livable due to lack of ventilation and light. The courtyard was created mindful of existing language, and rooms were wrapped around with deep verandas. Main features here is taking forward the environmental sensitivity from the traditional knowledge system. 45-centimeter thick stone random rubble walls, reusing the demolished material from the earlier ones, and 1-inch thick of lime plaster ensures effective mitigation of thermal heat retention and transmittance. Deep verandas surround the inner courtyard to mitigate direct solar gains. Detailing a facade with molding, sunshades mitigate water runoff. On the wall surfaces enhance the performance and delay deterioration of the finishes. Traditional waterproofing, that is lime dirt and terracotta cup cover, which actually creates a air gap on the concrete slab finished in requisite slopes, mitigate the solar gains effectively while allowing for efficient rainwater collection. This is how the rendition of the courtyard with contemporary and traditional. Materials are traditional, designs are contemporary. And here is the contextualization of the east facade, as you can see what was before and now. We also have the back at the created this big yard to allow for enhance the climatic response of the building. The project again took on 2014 phase 2 to look after the entire, and so we did a conservation management development plan, and these sectors 1, 2, 3, 4 are for conservation, while 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are the areas which can take new addition to create economic opportunity for continued maintenance of the property. Restoration of historic gardens are ongoing, and restoration for now, right now we are in phase 4 of the palace, the oldest building layer. But I'll stop there about that. This is something that I would love to share, is to realize really very tangibly the link between built fabric and cultural beliefs. And this was while researching and writing for the book, Traditional Architecture of Coorg. Coorg's fabric stands out for family mansions called Ainamani. These courtyard-type houses are large campus-like, situated strategically on high ground, often abutting the family's agricultural land. Most of them are 400 years old and on a well-preserved and looked after. Research revealed that the family houses are the embodiments of their ancestors, and hence, in turn, these houses have a place of reverence in the customs. All births, marriages, and death ceremonies are tied up with customary visit to the family home and ritualistic celebration. Each member of the clan, through the generation, has a place in these family homes always, no questions asked. A kind of social security, wouldn't you agree? And so most were inhabited. In recent years, a caretaker is often engaged by the family, thus it is the belief system that has emerged as a force of continuum in this kind of building type. This experience guided us to suggest creation of a family trust to Max and Valerie Sequeira, the inheritors of house at Khaligaon. As US citizens, their emotional connect with this inheritance was the primary force, but the future of an investment concerned them. More so, neither Max nor his brother were full-time residents of Goa. A family trust was indeed created, and we were able to give them a 4 ensuite bedroom, formal, informal family room, along with contemporary services, a house that could be lived in, and our outhouse was remodeled as caretaker's unit. Not only the house serves the clan, but has started to earn for its continued maintenance as homestay when rented to friends. Investment of 3.5 million is now the property value is in 10 million and above. But who can put a value on the emotional connection and the memories? Here is another house, example house at Para, which changed owners, 100 years old, and became another 4-bedroom villa with many more amenities. Key feature here is that the spaces have been given new uses to cater to contemporary living, as an open kitchen family dining is now in one of the yesteryear's formal rooms, while the services block today is repurposed as games room. All was conceived keeping the context of existing as the guide, all classic features like doors, windows, copings, renders, roofs restored, and the wraparound veranda and a courtyard are the key traditional design elements that really aid in such transformation amply. A rustique, add design, define and provide for the needs, not wants, really works well. Here, another 12 houses we have done in Goa, and others too have found new purposes. Popular are lifestyle stores, holiday homes, homestay, British boutique hotels, restaurants, bookshops, Architectural offices, arts and crafts centers, libraries, pre-play school, old age homes, homes for destitute, and I'm sure there are a few more. But all is not well. There are many which are being abandoned. There is standing heritage being buried alive. And then there is FAR, which is really the weapon of mass destruction. Unplanned and unregulated tourism on the beach side is just killing. And builders' second home craze is like ruining. I mean, it's just rampant. All of this really culminated in 2006 when regional plan came about, and this was inviting participation from the citizens' objections. It was in August in an architect's office that we started looking into the survey and land use, color coding on maps, settlement areas, commercial, residential, orchard, forest, and overlaid it at Google Map. And the finding was concretization of Goa. Total disregard of forest, marshes, mangroves, fields, and most visible was settlement zone. Massive gathering and massive participation by the citizens led to one single cry of revoke of regional plan. It was revoked and a special task force was constituted, and draft regional plan 2021, 2 years later in 2008 was notified. What is so important in that and so encouraging is to see both heritage and built and natural as eco-sensitive zones. Public participation in planning in Goa has found a foothold. In 2015, when I decided to take stock of heritage of Panjim, after a decade, this time we also mapped it. Listing while is qualitative, mapping is quantitative. Between 2005 and 2017, Panjim lost 124 heritage buildings. But more importantly, it has 907 as survivors, and many amongst them are now refurbished, earning a living through adaptive reuse, all this without legal protection. Primarily, it's the result of awareness drive that made the residents, owners, visitors see the value associated with all these buildings and appreciate the master craftsmen who had been at work for 4 centuries creating this remarkable, resilient ensemble. Same is not the case with most of our cities with historic cores. We seem to be compelled to build at the fastest pace and with least creative inputs for maximum monetary gain. We also have knowledge gap. While we have often heard that the existing building is the greenest, but we have not yet quantified the carbon loss when it is demolished. To conclude, let us review. The traditional system was a symbiotic relationship between nature and people that generated civilization lasting for thousands of years. Industrial era brought in people over nature, created products and waste. In culture-led climate action for sustainable future, we need to go back to the relationship of people and nature to then have a culture of respect for resources, one that cares, reuses, recycles, and reduces consumption. Cultural resource dynamics for climate action demands developing strategies wherein nature as espoused in Gaia principles is nurtured as the most valuable cultural resource. Land, forests, fields, rivers, and sea are cultural resources and not a commodity. Development is conservation oriented and vice versa, and also ecologically appropriate. All existing buildings, including 20th century buildings, are resources for their embodied energy and must be put to appropriate use and not demolished. Citizens are co-participants in shaping the future of the country. All built environment professionals, planners, architects, engineers, and allied, builders, developers, and hoteliers, etc., really need to come together and work together to facilitate and take more ownership of the role of custodianship. Thank you.
Thank you, Poonam, for a very inspiring presentation. You brought up a lot of important issues. For everyone who has questions, please put them in the chat. And at the end of the presentations, we will have a short question period. Our next speaker is Ganit Mayslits Kassif from Israel. Ganit has a degree in architecture from the University of Westminster in London and has taught at the Bartlett School of Architecture in England and the Technion in Israel, and now leads a design studio and master's research lab at the Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem. In her studio, Mayslits Kassif Reutman, Ganit combines research and practice to the growing challenges of the built environment, fusing various design fields from public buildings and landscape architecture to urban design and strategic planning. Her particular interest in research is architecture as an agent of urban and environmental transformation. Ganit has led various notable projects, which included innovative ideas for Israel in the urban and public realm. One of those projects is the Tel Aviv port regeneration, which she will speak about as a case study today. Ganit, please.
Hello, everyone. I will just try to share my screen, hopefully without too many problems. Just a sec. Can you see my full screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Right, so hello everyone. Very exciting, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's a really great pleasure to take part in this community of architects. Just read Ursula Le Guin, who wrote that listening is an act of community. And with such events, we truly build our community and advance our collective goals and missions, which we all feel are so crucial to our mutual present and future existence on this planet. Today, I will going to present Tel Aviv Port Renewal. Before, I will show a little, introduce our practice in a few words. Mike has advised me to do that since we are in a community. So we are a little bit between an architect's office and a big family. Udi, my lifetime partner, you can see here, and myself founded the practice on 94, and we are now 4 partners with Igal and Mao and around 20 people in the team. And as you can see, we both design and eat and talk and have fun together. All that needs to grow caring and daring architects with lots of imagination, which is our real resource. A few notes about us that might be interesting for this lecture is that we always reuse buildings for our office space. We started in a chicken coop, then moved to an old nightclub in the port, and in the last few years located in southern Tel Aviv in a former industrial building, which we renovated and actually rewilded with lots of vegetation and greenery that are so much needed around us. And here you can see our office and a little bit about our team. And as to the things that the main thing that characterize our work is, firstly, we believe it's time to reconsider the disciplinary separation between architecture and landscape architecture. And we therefore practice them both as part of the search for the most effective way to intervene in the urban ecosystem. And we deeply consider the essential aspects of public and private, inside and outside, cultivated and wild, that need to be considered in a holistic and integrated view rather than a separating and divided one. And that enable us to focus on the vibrant fusion between buildings and their surrounding landscape, since, as we always say, the places of interaction, the building skin, is the most interesting thing in our profession, and also what gives the identity of the place. And this is a sports center, and then this is a library, a sports center, which is a new building, and also in a renewal project, or a reused library, which in which we also opened the walls towards and connect the building and the public space around it. Also, another thing about us is that we are very interested in waterfront renewal project, and we do quite a lot of them. This is the Tel Aviv Central Promenade. Here is the Acre waterfront, the Petah Tikva Eco Lake, and also in the strategic aspect, we developed the mother plan strategy, which I won't go into now, but it's also a way to I would say a methodology to intervene and to create, in a way, an alternative to the master plan. So this is just a glimpse, but I find it relevant to share it with you, presenting the Tel Aviv project also because these characters of our work and the mother plan methodology grew very much out of the Tel Aviv Port project, which I will present today. It's a project that was very meaningful for our practice, and also considered quite influential in the attitude and values it promoted towards the design and regeneration of urban spaces in Israel. So our work on the renewal project took place mainly between 2003 and 2008. Yet, in order to understand its reuse aspect, I will start with a brief background. I like to start with this photo from the 30s, which remind us that in Israel, what we called Old Port is not actually that old. It was built by our grandparents and also with some camel convoys, since there wasn't any really great infrastructure for this new settlement. And in many ways, it was also part of the whole pioneering experimental spirit that characterized the urban lab of the international style in Israel, in Tel Aviv, that as we find it, maybe Jeremie will talk about it later, but it's probably the most inspiring aspect in our heritage. Yet, unlike the highly professional and meticulous spirit of the international style architects, here on the edge of the city where the port was built, it was built definitely with great enthusiasm, but with many unskilled workers and not many marine engineers. And that's why that although it had a very dominant cultural and communal values, it provided the Jewish community and the Jewish pioneers that came to Palestine at that time a gate to import and export independently goods and new immigrants as well. But it never quite functioned as a proper professional port and was closed down on 1965. If we look briefly at this timeline, we can see that our intervention which started in 2003, was followed by 4 decades in which this prime part of the city, probably located in one of the most amazing waterfront peninsula, was very much derelict and neglected. And this is how we found it in 2003 when the architectural competition was announced. You can see these hangars, lots of walls, lots of fences. In these buildings that you see here were facing the sea with the blocked facades. The public area, which had this amazing potential of unmediated attachment to the waterfront, was basically a rubbish yard. And mostly we had the public space was mostly served for parking, which was the main source of income for the Port Authority. However, the less known part of the port history and the relevant one for the interesting part in the context of this seminar is that behind this neglect, there were many architects envisioning new futures, and this whole area was subject of many competitions and grand master plans by international acclaimed architects. These are just a few examples I found in the old drawers of the port office with projects by Herzberger and Rogers and great many visions. However, our project started with a public competition that was organized by a new vision and very visionary management that came to the port with a totally new agenda and a vision which called to bring back the port to the city and to do it now. So the strategy was not to wait for long-term planning, but to introduce operative design that reuses the existing buildings, and most importantly, invest in the public space as the game changer that suggests an alternative to the familiar formula of development with massive building rights. This is the project that we propose. This is our proposal. We suggested this undulating urban platform, which in its abstract design is actually open to possibilities. We hope to create a breeding ground for new forms of urban waterfront culture. As you can see here in the left drawing, the existing hangars became the actual context for the project. And what we see here, that the concept was to do as little as possible in order to achieve as much as possible. And we suggested this unprogrammed hybrid. We very much felt that Tel Aviv needs this unprogrammed space, a place to pause. And we found that the interesting challenge here is to create some informal hybrid between the informal beach environment and the ever-present texture of the city. And the quite surprising thing was that unlike other competitions we won before, here they were very serious about realizing the project. Just after we won the competition, they set up a meeting and said, let's do it. And we started working on the construction drawing, and looking at it now, it seems that we were a little bit involved in something like we call guerrilla urbanisms or something like that, because the situation was that at the same time that we were doing the working drawing on the decks and the whole sort of refurbishment, there were still new zoning plan, which was on its final stages of approvals, and positions great built buildings on the very site that this guy is working. And I remember going to the sort of port management and saying, do we know what we're doing at all? You know, there's this master plan, and here there's supposed to be lots of new buildings. And what they say to me, they say, we'll be quick. And actually that worked. So our strategy was to operate lightly and quickly and to create space that the public would vote with their legs and in a way construct the city de facto. And as it sometimes happened in projects, when few motivated people share a vision and a lot of passion and a lot of luck also, it worked. And from the first day that the project opened, the public really, you know, from all the metropolitan area and all over Israel gravitated to it and enjoyed this very totally different, unique atmosphere, very playful, inspiring, open to interpretation, and an opportunity to experience the city edge and the special thing about waterfront, it is that interaction with this big body of nature. So we managed to realize our concept of a new type of public space, which is neither city nor beach, but this hybrid. We were highly motivated with telling a story that is open-ended and grows possibilities rather than fixating programs. And maybe most importantly, we were driven by the wish to host the public in a different way. Tel Aviv is a very dense city, and it's becoming dense every minute. Flats are becoming smaller, and public space is growing increasingly more important. And our wish, being actually before this project, we were doing buildings, we were not doing landscape. That's why this project was so influential in our practice history. But we wanted to introduce the same quality of design and detail that we do in buildings and in private properties in the public space, and to promote new agenda of hospitality in the city's outdoor. For us, a big achievement is to see people like that, you know, feeling at home in the public space, or you know, sitting here in a situation which we call the urban living room, using the laptop and you know, a family. Normally things that we do at home, doing them outside in the open with other people. This was for us the great achievement. And we wanted to treat all public space, even the parking area, as a potential for multiple uses. And treat it with great care. We were very excited to see people with white overalls, you know, drawing our graphic very meticulously on a parking park, which can be many things, and not only serving cars, but also, as you can see here, serving the triathlon participants as a temporary parking for them, and become a platform for many public expressions. I see here my time is running up, so I'll go very quickly. So I will go here very quickly about the things, this urban platform that continually surprised us with the different activities in their Kabbalat Shabbat or skaters, very diverse, very full of life and hospitality and opportunities, spontaneous performance artists and organized ones, outdoor used book market, and even communal wedding ceremonies that happened at the port at the time of missiles in the north of Israel. I'll go quickly go really quickly on these in order to go to the building aspect here. So interestingly enough, about the built aspect that you can see here, I would like to say that we took part in quite a unique urban experiment in Israeli terms, which proposed an alternative to the grand master plan development with reuse of existing infrastructure. And it truly felt at the beginning a rather risky strategy that was yet to be proved. Since while we were working on the public space renewal, a lot of resources were invested in renovating the old port buildings, some of them by the Port Authority, as this one, and some of them by private entrepreneurs that rented the hangars with long-term contracts and invested in them. But shortly after the decks were open to the public, it was clear that this new agenda proved successful also in economic aspects, and that always convincing the all parties, because revenues on the hangars rent grew from $5 per square meter to $50 per square meter, and that created financial resilience for the Port Authority, although they didn't do any massive development. And finally, I want to stress that the success of the outcome was very much of this revolutionary, I would say, attitude, at least in our status quo, was the port's management, their acceptance of a new agenda of investment in the public space, not as a leftover area, which is the outcome of the profit-making build space, but as a leading agent and a prominent factor in the whole development. That enable a lively interaction between the buildings and between the public and the private properties. And I will just go to the final slide here, where I show that maybe the most important thing that happened almost 20 years after that is that the new master plan that is now being proposed by Rosenfeld Arendt's architects propose a new smart and humble also mixed-use development, which also preserve, as you can see here, the existing port area and some of the buildings in the Levant Fair area and connecting to the Yarkon River. So I understand that my time is gone, right?
Yes, it's time. We have other speakers
Okay.
to get to as well.
Okay, so thank you very much. And this is just the last slide of the annex to this project, which is the Tel Aviv Promenade, which is the last thing I'm showing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Ganit, for a very interesting presentation. One of the things Ganit mentioned to me when I asked her to speak was that the idea was to bring the port back to the city now, back to the people, and it looked like it's a very successful project. I get to enjoy it sometime soon, too. Okay, our next speaker is Jharna Joshi from Nepal. Jharna is an architect, heritage conservation specialist, as well as a national and international tourism specialist. She has a degree in architecture and is a doctor of philosophy as well. Jharna has worked on conservation and restoration of traditional residences and other buildings in Kathmandu. She was the vice president of Nepal ICOMOS for 6 years and is currently a consultant for the UNESCO Kathmandu office and has worked in several countries on conservation projects. Jharna will speak about the restoration and upcycling of buildings with the goal of creating sustainable building practices. Jharna and Jeremie, the next speakers, please try to keep within the time frame so we will have some time for questions at the end. You can put your questions on the chat, everyone. Thank you. Jharna, please.
Good day, good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all, and thank you, Andrew and the team for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about this topic that I'm very passionate about. Well, after the two beautiful presentation, I feel like I'm throwing some cold water over over everyone, because it's my first slide is a harsh reminder of the consequences of our work as well. So, but I think this is a good platform to talk a little bit about the wider impact of our of the building industry that we are all part of. Well, we all know that this industry is a major contributor to waste. I'm sure we've come across, we've talked about this, we've discussed this, but I think I would just like to start my talk with a little bit a reminder of what we are doing to the world and how we can, and then I will follow up with a few examples of small steps that we can take, small efforts that we can do to try to mitigate the impact that this industry has in the environment. So, so one of the, it's very difficult to find specific information on how much impact this building industry has on the environment. And there's bits and pieces of information from all over the world, but I think that the information is increasing though, and it shows that this industry is making an effort to come out to try to mitigate some of the damage that it does. And so one of these the materials that we use now is concrete, and this is just some information that I found to just wanted to share, that how much this concrete and cement is the concrete and cement that we are using. So it's and for the to use this concrete to make the cement and concrete, we are also using a lot of sand and rock, which is not only aesthetically impacting the landscape, but also factors of climate change as well. So this figure is staggering, and this is not even a new figure. This I found from 2001. It's like 12.6 billion tons of raw material each year. So that's how much we are using worldwide. And in Nepal, one of the major building material is a brick, and this is a traditional building material as well, but it is also a major contributor to air pollution, especially in the Kathmandu Valley, as Kathmandu is a valley, and so when the air gets polluted, it kind of like stays, and it needs like rain or wind to blow it over, which is you cannot. It's a natural phenomenon, and you cannot have it when you want it. The brick industry is also most active during the dry season, which is also when we don't have much wind. So this kind of stays in, and the other factor is like because Nepal is a developing country, which means that we are building a lot of infrastructure right now, and which also means that more and more brick kilns are coming up, and which they are actually coming up where we used to have agricultural land. As you can see from this picture, this is actually the smoke coming out of this brick kiln is in the middle of a residential area as well as agricultural land. And more and more, we can see more and more brick kilns coming up where there used to be, beautiful farmlands. So this is a little bit of recent data. It's from World Bank did a study in Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, and most of the brick kilns that are operating in this part of the world is the traditional ones without the improved technologies that that kind of like lessens the air pollution. While Bangladesh is leading with about 60% that have brick kilns that have been converted into like to reduce the air pollution, and Nepal is roughly like 17%, whereas India is does poorly in this. Nepal, I think, also does a little bit better because it's a small country and comparatively smaller, much smaller than Bangladesh and India. The barriers to why this industry has not improved is the same old story in the developing countries. Is this is a very gray area. It's a sort of weak regulations, and the resources, the human resources, and the know-how is very low level, and there's also not. But I think the major reason is the political will. If there is political will, then these barriers are not very difficult to overcome. So the brick industry not only like produces, the building industry not only produces a lot of waste or pollution when it in the production, but also produces a lot of waste, especially with the construction materials and demolition waste. Waste generated each year is staggering. In the UK, in the EU, there's 450 million tons of construction waste every year. But the good news is that some of the countries are doing, such as Germany, especially Germany and Netherlands, are recycling the waste. And there is there seems to be some genuine efforts in other parts of the world as well to reduce the waste. But still, it's comparatively it's not. It's still, we still have a long way to go. And also especially in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, and also this is from Belgrade as well. So in other parts of the world as well, the way construction waste is not well managed. So these waste are the construction waste are taking up a lot of the infill landfill sites, which is not a solution at all, because the leaching that the cement creates, this waste creates, it goes down to the it goes into the earth, and then also pollutes our water system as well. So this is a very serious issue that we need to kind of start to mitigate, take it seriously, more seriously than it is. I just wanted to give you an example of how much waste is being generated in Indian cities, 165 to 175 million tons annually. So that's a, after mining, I think that's the second largest industry. Construction industry is the second largest industry to produce waste. And also again, the problem in our part of the world is that these are dumped. Most of the waste is not even, dumped in the landfill sites, but it is in just dumped in like vacant lands and the side highways, and it's even on burying like in lakes and ponds. Well, in India, they even have a term for it called fly lip tipping. And in Bengaluru, they are dumping the waste in lake beds and encroaching upon these lakes. And again, like I said, this goes in, the waste goes in and then it pollutes the water that we and not only the human, but all life depend on. This is just to elaborate a little bit on, there are some efforts being done. This is again an example of Bengaluru in India. The government is trying to impose some legal channels to stop this dumping, but there has not been very good response from the builders and contractors. They even though they do have capacity to process construction and demolition waste, but there is very little interest from the building industry to seriously take this upon. Somehow it seems like we haven't really realized the impact that our industry has on the earth. So now with a short reminder of the waste, I just wanted to start the second part of my talk with this quote from architect Nicholas Groves Rain. Sustainability in architecture has to start with restoration of existing buildings. Keeping what we have and reusing it is one of the best ways to save carbon. So like I said earlier, it's the demolition cost. We are not just, it's not just about building new, the construction materials that we use for building new structures, but when we are demolishing some buildings, that cost has also to be accounted for. The common belief is that restoration is more expensive than new construction, but we have not taken into account the cost of demolition and the cost of that waste, the demolition waste, the construction waste, the cost of it on the environment. And that I do know that that is not very easy to calculate, but it is good to keep that in mind when we are restoring or building new buildings. So I just wanted to give you some examples of what we've been doing here, and I just wanted to start with a little bit of background on the kind of architecture in Nepal. Is the vernacular buildings were always efficient and sustainable as well, because they use local materials, locally sourced materials. This is an example of a house from the northern part in the high Himalayas in Namche Bazar. This is on the way to Mount Everest Base Camp, and the stone is readily available here. So most of the houses here, traditional houses here, are thick stone walls, which keeps the heat in, and the houses are faces south for the sunlight, for light as well as warmth, and then there's not much ventilation or openings in the northern sides, northern part of the building. So, whereas in the south of Nepal, we have bamboo lattice and mud plaster walls, thick and thin walls, but with large overhangs, and because this is to cope with the hot climate in the southern part of Nepal. I'm sorry if it's a little bit disturbing, because there's some festivities going on, some celebrations going on in my neighbors. So I'm sorry if that's disturbing you, but I'll try to speak clearer louder than the music coming from my neighbors. So this just a few examples how our buildings vernacular architecture is uses local materials and is sustainable, uses passive energy as well. And this is the image of, this is Kotgaon in Khandri. It's a Gurung village. And the way the houses are clustered around each other is creating interesting spaces, but also these spaces, working spaces that are safe and also utilizes the sun, the passive energy, the wind, sun, and to protect the houses as well as to gain from it. And this is an example of my one of our recent projects. And this is a residence that the family hasn't been living there permanently for more than 10 years. So this has become a little bit neglected. And but they wanted to come back and use it as a family farmhouse, a family holiday home. So one of the things the brief that I got from them in our first meeting was that whenever they went back and they wanted to go there frequently, was that the house has to be cleaned. Should be, they should be able to clean the house in half an hour or less. So this, and the main thing that they wanted with this building was upgrading the house, because this traditional house did not have indoor plumbing. So what we did was we kept the original building as it is. There's only changed a little bit on the top floor because the roof, because they hadn't been living there for a long time, the roof was not in a very good condition. So that was one of the things, that major work that we did was re-roofing, but we used most of the original stone tiles, and we added most of the wet areas like the kitchen, the bathroom, and the staircase, and kept the and reused everything that we could. Like I said, the roof tiles were taken out one by one and then put back in other parts of the house. So we use every bit and piece of the stone, and the other. This is the front of the house. This is actually the back side of the house. This is the western side of the house, and this is the front of the house that faces the east. So here again, we mostly repaired what was there, and then added. If we couldn't repair it, we added it. But then again, like I said, we use everything, and some of the wood was had been damaged, had rotted. So but we used whatever we could and however we could. For example, this parketing that you see on the right, this is the stair landing. This was all. This is just pieces of wood that was lying around, and I have to say that the carpenter was not very happy to do it, but we had to offer them a special initiative to do this. But it's really beautiful. This is not even a finished picture that I have here, but it's really beautiful because this wood is like taken from bits and pieces of different parts of it. So it has different textures. So you didn't even have to do anything to get this very rich texture that I was very happy with. But at the end of the work, the carpenters were also happy about it. But at the beginning, it took a little bit of convincing for them to use little bits of pieces like this. Same with the roof tilers as well. They wanted everything new, but we did reuse every bit of so in order to reduce any construction waste. I don't think we had any and we had to dispose anything outside of the land, because we could use whatever the construction materials to fill in the land as well. So there's nothing that we took out to the landfill sites from this house.
Jharna, we're going to have to.
Another thing
finish
is
up
with
so we can get the
vernacular
next
building.
speaker. We'll have to finish
Sure.
up soon so we can have the next speaker, please. Thank you.
Sure. So the other thing about vernacular building is that every building, it's well, once we build a building, it's not the end of the story. The buildings have to be maintained and taken cared for. So this is the maintenance is the key to this. This is another example of a house in Bandipur in Nepal, and it's a hilltop town. And this building was badly damaged because the owners were not living at it. We restored it, reusing the materials and just repairing and wherever we could. And these three pictures show you the before, during work, and the finished house. This was a residence which was converted into a guest house. This pink building is the again we added one story to this building when we reconstructed. Because I'm almost out of time, but I just wanted to briefly talk about this, what little efforts can do, little efforts in restoration can do to towns as well. This is again in Bandipur, which was the paving had been totally destroyed by when they started when vehicles started coming in. So one of the things that we did here was repaving the bazaar area, the main street, with stone. It was stone before as well, but when the vehicles started coming in, they got damaged, and it was either very dusty in the dry seasons and very muddy in the rainy seasons. So after we repaved it, we paved it. When we paved it, what we did was we involved the local community as much as possible. So we gave them the technical support, we gave them the materials, but supervision was done by the residents themselves. So that was very useful. Also, so that the residents themselves took ownership of the project, as well as it also ensured that the quality work was done, because they were vested. The residents are vested in their own place. And the other thing that they did was we had initially planned that to have a track for emergencies, for vehicles to come in, that you can see from the picture on your right. But the residents themselves decided that this is going to be completely the town was going to be completely vehicle free. So they demolished the steps, the track, and then they put just the steps to go in. So it's totally vehicle free now, and this is the first town in Nepal to do this, to ban vehicles, total ban of vehicles, vehicles that is two-wheelers as well. So so what that has done is, like, it's given them the clean air and clean environment to not just for the visitors. It's a very popular tourist destination and a very popular destination for music videos and film shoots. But it's also what I feel very satisfying is also that it is a wonderful place for children to play as well. So this a very safe and clean place for the children to play. So and this, because of this, of the vehicle free and clean environment, the houses, and now the residents themselves, they value the vernacular architecture, the traditional buildings, and they've started restoring these buildings, and most of them are converted into guest house and restaurants, but there are still, most of them are still owned by the residents, so there's not that much of a gentrification per se at this moment. And yes, that was that was what I wanted to say. But in conclusion, I just wanted to repeat that reusing what we have and trying to reduce the construction waste. We, as architects, we are also responsible for not just creating beautiful environments, but also trying to mitigate, decrease the waste that we generate as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jharna. You summarized that perfectly at the end, the issues of construction waste and restoration. Okay, our final presenter today is Jeremie Hoffman from Israel. Jeremie is an architect and historian and is the current head of the conservation department of the city of Tel Aviv-Yafo, or Jaffa in English. He is the founder of Liebling House, White City Center, and the head of the Liebling Research Center for Modernism. He's a member of other research programs, including the Heraland PhD and UNESCO's Heratopolis programs. Jeremie currently teaches historic urban landscape studies at the Negev School of Architecture and has publications about brutalist and postmodern architecture in Israel. Today, he will present the city of Tel Aviv as a case study for the development of planning principles and for preservation of the historic urban context. Jeremie, please.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. I'll try to share my screen. Just let me know if it works okay. Always stressing this part. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we see you.
Okay, so as you said, I'll introduce the case study of Tel Aviv. So Ganit very well proposed or presented the port of the city. So I'll try to explain a little bit the larger context of the city and the adaptation to current needs of the city. So I will try with a brief 60 seconds of history of development of the city to understand the context today. So I'll go back to the 19th century, the city of Jaffa, the old Arab, Jewish, Christian city, port city at the south part of what is today modern city of Tel Aviv. So this is the first map. Then the early beginning of creation of the new city, 1908 is the picture, and 9 is the beginning of construction of the new city, is the first selfie of the first immigrants, Jewish immigrants arriving to the Palestine, Eretz Israel at that time, and the first small neighborhood that created Tel Aviv called Achuzat Bait, and then the expansion of the city towards the north on the dunes of Tel Aviv. So the first stage of the creation of the modern city was the design by Sir Patrick Geddes that was called by the city community to create a larger plan for the city and envision an idea for an expanded structure for the city. So the proposed plan by Geddes, which is presented here, 1925, what is called the Geddes report, presented an idea of a modern in terms of a healthy city, a garden city made by the idea of a block, a basic block that is reproduced and creating the structure of the existing city. Now, the main idea of this Geddes block is to gather a whole structure of housing around a garden, which is called the Geddes Garden, or the block garden. And the reproduction of the idea of these blocks make small communities and make an infrastructure for the city, a healthy structure. The garden would enable the citizens to have kindergarten, to have whatever the changing needs of a city. It could be parking lots, mainly gardens, trees, fruits, vegetables, schools, and the ability of each block to adapt itself to the different forms, the different land sizes, existing little Arab villages that were at that time at this open area. So this led to a context when there was big waves of immigration to Tel Aviv because of the Second World War and many events of first half of 20th century. So between 1930 and 1948, the whole plan was completely constructed in modern style architecture because of the fast expansion of the city of Tel Aviv. So this created new styles of architecture, which I suppose we are familiar with. During the 20s, the eclectic style, immigrants arriving from different countries, mainly Eastern Europe, Central Europe, North Africa, bringing different styles and sometimes creating mixtures of style. And it's also the early beginning of modernism. You can see in these first forms. Then came the real modernity, after starting at around 29, especially after the world financial crisis. Israeli or Jewish architects and engineers went to Europe to study architecture in the famous schools of Bauhaus and Gantt and others, coming back to Palestine, coming back to Tel Aviv and creating the modern architecture, modern city. So the whole ensemble of Tel Aviv is made of more than 5,000 buildings in this modern style architecture. And I will fast forward history. 2003, the city is declared by UNESCO as World Heritage Site for the criteria of urban planning and for its vast collection of architecture. So this is a very short history. So I'll get to the adaptive reuse today and the needs of the city. So our main problem is the need for densification of the city and being very concrete today to the issues today is the cost of life, the cost of the city, which could be a paraphrase on the right to the city. So we have the cost of the city, and these needs to have housing in the city center and around led to the fact that in Israel, we don't have conservation laws or we don't have, let's say, funds for conservation. So the city had to look for solutions made by the city in order to enable the huge project of conserving the city center. So it led to two proposed solutions that were implemented. The first at the left side was the ability to have additions on the roofs of existing houses. So this was implemented in what we called simple Bauhaus buildings. And on the right side, in 10% of these houses, a little bit more than 10%, the ability to have to sell the building rights to mainly to towers or other areas in the city which go to in processes of development and enable to finance the works of conservation. So this led to a new language of architecture, which again enabled these adaptations of the old houses to current needs. Just an example, not in the White City, the CBD, Central District area of Tel Aviv. So these two different Bauhaus or modern style buildings were connected together to create the Central Rothschild Bank of Israel. So you can see the need to adapt the buildings to current historical and current needs in the city, and the ability to conserve the existing houses, the facades, but not only the facade, the stairs, the entrances, the lobby, the roofs, and everything, and still create a new language of architecture, an expansion of the city, which is today the current, if I could use the term, style or architecture of the city of Tel Aviv. So we have a lot of examples. I will show just some of them here. You can see different styles of modern buildings and different approaches towards this idea of expansion on the roof or sometimes behind the building. Sometimes it's the only buildings in Israel that enable having housing solutions in cellars, creating what we call English gardens, like open gardens behind the building on -1 level. And this again enables the buildings to adapt themselves to current needs, to current criteria of construction, reinforcing them against earthquakes and other needs of the city today. So as I'm the last one, I'll go a little bit briefly. So some examples, and really in the city center, keeping the existing language of modernity and creating a very contemporary language of architecture. Just some slides. This slide I chose just to show that not all propositions are approved by the city. So some of them we don't we don't approve, and some of them which are a little bit bigger than the usual are outside of the boundaries of the White City or the modern city or the area which is declared by UNESCO as World Heritage Site. There's different approach towards this language. We try to be a little bit minimalistic in the city, in the real city historical centers. Some of the buildings are keeping the exact original form without enabling these changes or additions, but still they have to adapt themselves with technology, new technologies against fires, against for contemporary electricity needs and all other solution needed by architects. This is a complex, a housing complex that was originally a hospital. So the adaptive reuse is the change between hospital, for example, to housing projects, very successful, with very high demand to live in the center. We also try to use the same method for other parts of the city. This is an example in Jaffa. So we expand, as we see it as a successful method, we expand this method to other parts which are not modernized in terms of Geddes plan and Garden City, but still keep a form of differentiation between the existing buildings and the additions. Sometimes we're making plans to connect some existing buildings together and to create space between these buildings or backyards in order to connect them together and create a whole new environment of high quality architecture to enable the change between the transformation of the houses to other uses, such as offices. In this case, is a big lawyer's firm that needed these spaces, but still keep the form, the original form of architecture, and conserving the structures themselves. So you can see here the original shape of the buildings as they were at the end of 19th, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, sometimes 15 years ago. Was very difficult to pursue the building owners to make these changes, to go through the process of renovating, to understand the qualities of architecture, the importance of the style, but the change is done and we feel it's quite a good success, especially we're not depending the state of Israel or the government. We have our own sources of finance, which is very positive in these processes here. So we have new layers like brutalism that I suppose, again, you are all familiar with, but this is new layers of research in the city center. We try to adopt this new style, which is not easy for people to understand. It's not easy for my bosses here in the municipality, the city municipality, to understand the qualities, the importance of this new layer representing the independence of the state of Israel, representing a new approach towards society, post-war approach. But still we're trying to create new tools to adapt these structures to current needs of education, sports, music halls, industry, and different needs. Sometimes we keep and preserve the structures without being able to adapt them to the original, like for example, this structure for sports. So we just keep them as reminders of history, and we're trying to redefine their use today. So we are open to new ideas in that term, mainly from architects like Ganit and others that give us really, they're very creative in that sense, and give us very interesting new ideas about that. So you can see here, this new layer, this brutalism layer, is also the base for additions, for adaptation of, for example, at the upper slide, you can see an historical agricultural bank, which is being transformed today to a hotel. We create lots of new hotels, new what we call boutique hotels in the city center, trying to keep from one hand the original form of the building, the original style of the building, but with the addition, giving a new form, a new layer, but keeping the whole structure together as a whole, something that we can pass on to the next generations. Some of the solutions we create is having new structures near the existing historical house in order to enable paying these works. And at this example, this new building, this new blue building, having small apartment that will be owned by the owners of the existing historical housing building, and as I said, enable the densification of the city, enable having good financial resources for the works. And this is an example of new urban plans that we are creating today, again, in order to enable the conservation of these different layers of history of the city. We're making publications about each layer, each style of architecture of the city. And now we start talking about postmodernism as a new layer, something that is still difficult to digest, if I could use that term, to understand the role of this historical era in the evolution of our society here in Tel Aviv, in Israel, around the globe. And these are new issues that we're working on today, trying to understand these forms that were created in the city during the 90s, during the 2000s, quite recent, but we regard them as the new historical layer of the city. Another example, the Eastern Fair, that was, you could see the slides by Ganit. These are the historical structures, the international fair that was at near the port of Tel Aviv. So the adaptation of new plans. The Asuta Hospital is an example of a hospital that was in the city center until 10 years ago. And the new plans of adaptation of this hospital to housing, it's a very successful and good housing ensemble today in the city center. So you can see the additions, the ability to add floors, but the development, which is completely new in sense of adaptation to the needs of housing complexes in the city center. And these are the results. You can see the original image. You can see the results today. It's 4 years ago, the slides. So we have the big trees today, where it's much greener and it's beautiful. It's very successful. And on the other hand, sometimes we add public structures in the same language of architecture. We're not trying to create a new Bauhaus style or new modernism, but just to keep the existing colors and forms of the complex, but adapt the needs of children, of schools, of the city again, and to create a complex which will be able to give all the public needs for the new inhabitants of the city center. The central CBD, which is again outside of the boundaries of the white city, the CBD, the central business districts, where we create high-rise building for financial centers, for housing, but still we make a good mixture between very modern, very up-to-date architecture from one hand, and on the other hand, conserving the existing houses and mixing them together. This is on Rothschild Boulevard, very good, very successful. People like walking there, seeing historical buildings, but still being on the shade of these new towers, which are adapted to a reuse of the city center. Another example, a square, the Dizengoff Square. This is the historical photo of this modern historical square. This was the new existing square, the change that was, the square was changed during the 70s, the beginning of 70s. Could argue it was brutalist, the separation between roads, streets, and the square itself. made a big damage to the city center, very neglected, very negative. So we decided to destroy it and to recreate and to sell parts of the original the square to people who kept parts of the square in order to remember it. So there was a big need of people to have some souvenir of the square before it was taken down, and then recreate or bring back the original square of Dizengoff. And today it's really successful. It's maybe the most fashionable area of the city today, but we were, I must be honest and say, we were really worried during the works, during the planning, whether it would be successful, because we felt we took some chance, changing big infrastructures in the city centers. It costs a lot, takes a lot of time, 2 years of hard works. One of the last examples is the area of Florentine on the south part of city center, more eclectic, more modern in terms of European modernity. So we're trying to create new systems in order to have additions, to keep only facades of the buildings. It's a different approach toward conservation, but it enabled areas which have less capacity, financial capacities, and others to keep and the buildings. But it seems like very successful adaptive use to use in terms of, again, to densification. Some images of this new architecture, new Florentine architecture, and some hotels. And one of the last examples, the well houses. We found some Palestinian historical well houses in Jaffa, around the center of Jaffa. So we thought they were all spread around. They were used during the 19th century as agricultural mechanism for orange trees. So they were all neglected, and we decided to conserve them, but to create new centers for public, for new public uses, and in that sense to renovate them, to conserve them, and to open them to the public as areas with multi-languages, with Arab. You could see Arab, Hebrew mixed together, communities mixed together. And we think that in that sense, architecture is an opportunity to create better societies, better communities. And I would argue it works quite well. Another infrastructure for this adaptive reuse is the center, as you mentioned, the White City Center, or the Liebling House, is a new center we created in order to open the idea of conservation, the idea of modernity to the public, and to create special spatial areas devoted to the ideas of modernity, to the ideas of conservation, of white city, of architecture, a lot of exhibitions, a lot of researchers, and especially, which is for me the most important, a lot of activities for children, for the new generation, to be more aware of the importance of preservation, of conservation, from one side, and densification and quality of the city, to understand not only nature, not only elephants and giraffes, but also buildings and squares and sidewalks and streets. So we teach the city for children. So this is an image which I like very much. So that would be the last slide, showing that this is Tel Aviv, like we love it. I found this image in a children's book, which I read to my daughter, who was born the same date as Tel Aviv was declared as World Heritage City. And last week, unfortunately, she was called by the army to start her military service. So this is the age of my daughter. She's 18. This is the age of the declared nominated area by UNESCO of Tel Aviv. So we are young, we are growing, we are learning, and perhaps we can teach something, as she's teaching me something every day. And more we have to learn, we have to understand, we have to listen to you guys, you architects, which are the most prominent people to teach us, to give us new ideas for the future of the city. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremie, for a very interesting presentation and showing us some creative responses to heritage conservation. There was a lot of chat going on in the chats, not a lot of questions. Some were already answered, but one question that comes up, and it's for any of you: how can one convince and educate elected representatives about the value of adapted use? So if one of you would like to take that, and then we'll stop at that and go on to our summary. Thank you. Is there someone who'd like to
I
answer
would
that?
suggest Jeremie to take that one first.
What was the question? I'm sorry. How can we teach people about adaptive reuse?
Elected officials in particular.
Elected officials. So my elected officials, I'm trying to send them to Quebec, to the Organization of World Heritage Cities Congress at the 4th of September. Instead of going myself there, it will be devoted to preservation of historical cities. And the more we can send them to conferences, the more we can teach, and the more we can open the elected people to the opportunities of the city, we have bigger chances to raise awareness and to put them in our side in decision making.
Thank you. Poonam, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say it's very hard. And it's really through the political, because in India, what we have realized is we are ancient civilization, but as a democracy, we are a very young country. So public participation and public sentiments, when conveyed, that's the only thing that elected officials really listen to. So this collective of the public is the only force, to my mind, and keeping more and more dialogue. And what is interesting is that, I don't know if you know, that we have now 2 amendments to Constitution of India, 73rd and 74th, which actually provide for public participation in planning at village level and as well as municipality level. So, and this participation, I don't know about the rest of the country, but in Goa, the smallest state, this is what is paving the way. There is increased participation, and then politicians can't really, do whatever they want, which tends to be the case otherwise.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask Professor Michael Turner to summarize today's presentations. Mike is an architect, professor, and UNESCO co-chair holder in urban design and conservation at the Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem. He's been involved in urban and environmental issues in Israel since first establishing the first municipal unit of this in 1974 and participated in master plans of the Old City. He has served on many international and professional academic bodies and contributed several articles and participated in academic forums all over the world. Mike, could you please summarize today's events? Thank you.
Thank you. As we saw in the chat, this was a really rich menu which we had, and it was really an exciting understanding of what was happening around the world. We were opened up with Tanpei, our president, to look at the Sustainable Development Goals. And we always look at 11.4, safeguarding cultural and natural heritage. But that is not a goal, it's a target. It is safeguarding cultural and natural heritage to make our cities safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. It's a means to an end. And that picks up what Poonam had said, is that, which I really fully support, is that we shouldn't see culture as a fourth pillar, but we should see it as embracing the three not pillars, the spheres of sustainability. So I think that this really puts the issue on on the right footing. We were also given the differences between architecture and urbanism and the symbiotic relationships between the parts. So we're looking, therefore, the speed of change. And we're also looking at not just simply the evolution and continuity, the survival of the adaptive, as opposed to the survival of the fittest. And therefore, we were given by Poonam the actual adaptive and enhancement. And this is also was taken on board by Jharna, also speaking about recycle and to encycle. I think that we're actually speaking about continuity and the evolution, but the speed of continuity and evolution of architecture is dramatically different than the speed of continuity of urbanism. We were also given a presentation by Ganit about the importance of public-private. And what was interesting is that she presented the public space. This is what happened. Jana also spoke about in Bandipur about how the public space was actually taken on board. It must be the public commitment on the answering to Marla's question, is when the public and the public authorities show the commitment to what is happening and doing their activity first, it will be a catalyst for the private investment to take place afterwards. And I think both we saw in Bandipur and also in Tel Aviv, we saw this very, very rich and important message which came across. The other part which also looks at it is about the costs and value of redevelopment. In other words, when we say it's about its redevelopment, what is the cost for who? Where are the costs for the public? Where are the costs over time which has taken place? And I think this is another part which was really critical. And Jeremie, putting it in the last part of the story, brought us into the importance, therefore, of this continuity. And just consider, he opened up with a series of maps. And in fact, if I would like to think about that, Indira Gandhi, she was the only person to speak in the 1972 Stockholm Conference, spoke about the importance of culture and nature. I think it's a seminal presentation. And if I was to look at this, the importance, therefore, of this layering, which Jeremie spoke about, that the layering comes not just from the planning, but the architecture as well, really sets up the importance, therefore, of public participation, community involvement, and the livability of our environment. And I would just say our challenge is that the architecture of today is the heritage of tomorrow. Can we really match this responsibility? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone who participated today. I invite the other members of our Heritage and Cultural Group to contact Mohammed and Kasim and organize future webinars which aid and educate all of us. Thanks to our presenters and thanks to everyone for participating. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.